It's a good thing it's summer, because I'm ready for some shade. Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So, if you couldn't tell from that bit of an unusual intro, today I am doing the Unpopular Opinions book tag. I was kindly tagged by Victoria from What Victoria Read, who I will link down below. She's amazing, go check her stuff out. This is the book tag that is all about unpopular opinions, and in general, it's a fun one to watch. It's one of my favourite ones to watch. I'm very glad I've been tagged in it because I've kind of wanted to do it for a while. I've also been tagged in the no disclaimers book tag, so I'm going to do that video, but those videos are kind of going to be, I'm trying to talk about stuff that's different to each other because they're very similar tags. So rest assured there'll be so many unpopular opinions in this video, and then there'll be another video for even more people to disagree with me. So without any further ado, let's start the tag. So the first question is, what is a popular book or series that you didn't really like but everyone else seems to love? We're starting with an important one, and that is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. So I read this book last year. I read it with my partner, which was actually incredibly fun because we both absolutely hated it. I have written my longest blog post ever about this book, and I will link it down below if you want to know my thoughts in full. But basically I think this is a terrible book. It's got a lot of problems. I actually thought the second half was a lot more enjoyable than the first half, so overall I gave it 2 stars, not 1 star, but the first half is one of the hardest things to read that I've ever read. It's just so Ready Player One is about this world where humanity's kind of broken down, and most of people's living now occurs in these virtual online gaming places where people create avatars and they go and they live their lives in this virtual world. The guy who invented this virtual world has died, and he's left behind a legacy, so the person who can work out all of his puzzles will inherit all of his estate and his money and basically control of this virtual world. So everyone's devoted all of their time to trying to find and solve these puzzles. Our main character is on such a quest, and he is the biggest nerd ever, but he is the biggest, worst kind of nerd ever, so he's incredibly condescending. He magically knows everything, and he's magically good at all of the relevant skills. There are so many points in this book where it's just like, oh, I discovered that this clue was relevant to this one movie. Thankfully, I've seen this movie 180 times and know it off by heart, so it's no problem to me. And that just keeps happening again and again. He never struggles with anything. There's no, like, character growth. There's a female character in this, and she's alright. The main character's just a bit of a nice guy, and there's just so many problems. It's one of those books where I don't understand how people can like it, and I know people will like it, I know people will love it, and you know, if you love it, I would love to hear why you love it, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, I mean in a genuinely, I would like to hear why you think this is such a good book, because I don't think you're wrong for liking it. I just don't, from my point of view, I don't understand. It's like we didn't read the same thing, if that makes sense. So anyway, I should stop going on about Ready Player One. I've already written that massive blog post. I think I'm going to do a video on it at some point, when I can be brave enough to dare. And the next prompt is, what is a popular book that everyone hates but you like? I don't know how popular this book is, but I have picked The Surface Breaks by Louise O'Neill, mainly because I've heard so many people trash this on BookTube. I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 or 4.5 stars out of 5. Louise O'Neill's writing, I adore it. Basically this is a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid, but I think the word feminist kind of sets up some false expectations. This isn't the kind of feminism where it's like, oh yeah, girl power. This is the kind of feminism where it's like, oh god, everything is awful, look how awful it is, and it's a terrible mirror of our real world. So it's that kind of feminism where it's like, not really challenging it, but it is challenging it by demonstrating how terrible certain thought patterns are and things like that. It's kind of, yeah, it's a different vein of feminism. But yeah, this is a really bleak book. It's really heavy going, it's really hard to read. I can understand completely why people don't like it. It's not very creative with the Little Mermaid concept, it does just follow the plot of the Little Mermaid. And I think the other book I've read by Louise O'Neill's definitely better, Only Ever Yours. I much prefer that one. But this book gets hated on so much, and I don't think it quite deserves it. I think it's just that, yeah, it's not quite the feminism that maybe people expect. And I can understand why people don't like this. The next question is to pick a book or series that has a love triangle where you think the person ended up with the wrong part of that triangle. I really struggled with this. I haven't really read anything recently with love triangles in it. And the only one I could think of was The Hunger Games, because I spoilers for The Hunger Games, I guess. I'll put up my hand in case you don't want anything spoiled, and then I'll put it back down once I've finished talking about The Hunger Games. But I never believed that Katniss loved Peter. I thought she was dependent on him, and I just think the way that their relationship ends is super unhealthy, because he can still be easily triggered to murder her. And yeah, it's not necessarily that I thought Gale was better, it's just I never bought her love for Peter. But yeah, there's not really a love triangle I feel super strongly about, particularly. Yes, this isn't quite such a passionate question for me. The next question is, what is a popular genre that you don't reach for? I was originally going to say contemporary, but I do actually read contemporary books. It just has to be a specific type of contemporary. So what I'm actually going to say is science fiction, because I have been told so many times by people to read specific science fiction books, and I'm just not going to, because I have a very strong knowledge of what I like in science fiction, what I don't like, and I'm not closed-minded, which is what people always think, because I have tried a lot of science fiction. I just know at this point what I don't enjoy reading, and people just never seem to believe me, and they're always like, oh, you should try this, it's really good, and I'm like, no, I know that I'm not going to enjoy it, and it doesn't matter how great you tell me it is. I will read some science fiction books, but like I said, it has to be a very specific type of science fiction, and I'm very conscious of what I do and do not like in science fiction. So while there are plenty of great science fiction books out there, most of them are not for me, which is weird because I actually enjoy science fiction TV quite a lot. And I think the main difference is that it tends to be more dynamic and less bogged down in extensive details, or at least in a TV show I'm more able to ignore the extensive details if I wish, if that makes any sense. Oh boy, I'm not looking forward to this next question. So it is, what is a popular book character that people like and you do not like? I struggled with this. I was originally going to talk about Snape from Harry Potter, which is who Victoria talked about in her video, but she just did the perfect Snape rant, and I don't really need to talk about Snape again. I'm also doing a Harry Potter tag soon, so I will be talking about Snape in that. But for this one, I have two answers. One is really brief because it's not actually from books, but it's from a TV series based on books, and that's Game of Thrones. Lyanna Mormont, the little bear child, I just don't like her. I know she's loads of people's favourites, and I get why, but I just think she's like rude and abrasive, and every time she's on screen, I just don't think she's a badass. I think she's written too hard to be a badass for me to like her. So that's the one I think I'm going to get slated for. The other one is for a series I'm currently reading, and that is The Raven Boys. And I've just started the third book. And to be honest, I wasn't a massive fan of the second book. I kind of dissociated a bit whilst I was reading it, and I don't really remember it that well, so I might need to reread it at some point. But Ronan Lynch seems to be a lot of people's favourites. He seems to be everyone's baby, and I just don't like him. I just think he's a jerk. I could be wrong, I haven't finished the series yet, maybe he does some really great stuff. But yeah, I've never been a fan of the kind of cocky jerkish characters. To me, if you act most of the time like a jerk, then you are a jerk. The next question is, who is a popular author that you can't get into? And I'm going to have to say John Green for this one. I went through a phase a couple of years ago where I tried to read several John Green books. I read Looking for Alaska, I read Paper Towns, and then I read Abundance of Catherines. And it was the Abundance of Catherines that really broke me, because that was literally the same plot as Looking for Alaska and Paper Towns. Like, if you cut them in half and mush them together, that was the plot of Abundance of Catherines. And I was just tired of not having any originality in John Green's work. His writing style is just so deliberately quirky, and I can't stand it. Again, I don't like things that feel like the author is congratulating themselves, and for me it reads like he thinks he's being really quirky and witty and clever, and yeah, it's just not my style at all, unfortunately. I also will never ever read A Fault in Our Stars because I do not like any kind of media about people dying from disease or anything like that. I can't deal with it at all. So I know I'm definitely never going to read that book. But yeah, again, if you like John Green, that's great. I'm really glad you enjoy his work. I don't, sadly. The next prompt is, what is a popular trope that you are tired of? I'm kind of doing a series of videos very slowly where I do this by genre, so I've already done the thriller ones. I do have plans to do fantasy tropes that I love and hate, and also contemporary tropes that I love and hate, and I'm kind of going to do that for every genre. But for this one, I think I'm going to talk about kind of what I started with the Lyanna Mormont stuff, and that is, I don't like badass female characters when they feel forced, and this is very much a subjective thing, I believe. But for example, their non-book example, Captain Marvel, I really should have liked that movie more than I did, but I got annoyed because it felt false. It didn't feel true in the kind of feminism they were trying to do. It felt very heavy-handed, and I felt like I was being pandered to, and I don't like that. I am absolutely ecstatic to have more feminism and stuff, and I love badass female characters, but my problem is that they then become one-dimensional, and again, it's more a case of it just being done badly so often. But I want a cast of several different females, and some of them can be really badass, and some of them are just nice people, and some of them are not nice people, and you know, women are people. Like, they should just be the same as any other characters. There should be different varieties of personalities, and it shouldn't be that the female characters have to be perfect, or, you know, they have to do a big scene where they flashily upstage all the men. Like, sometimes they're good, and sometimes you can do that really well, but a lot of the time it just feels forced, and it just kind of highlights how little the female character is used the rest of the time. But yeah, that is my answer for that one. The next question is, what is a popular book series that you don't want to read? And I kind of touched on this earlier, but I've picked The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm not a high fantasy girl. I can't read high fantasy tropes, like works of fiction that are very, very bogged down in lots of world building and political stuff and endless descriptions of things or places. I like stories driven by character, and that doesn't gel well in general with the whole fantasy world. I am a fan of Game of Thrones, the TV series. I've tried to read the books and they do not work for me in the same way. I am going to try to listen to the audiobooks to see if those help, but I just know Lord of the Rings, I'm not going to enjoy it. And again, this is one of those books that people have always told me to read, because at university I'm the massive nerd, I'm known for being the nerd. And everyone was always really surprised that I didn't like Lord of the Rings, because I liked basically every other nerdy thing, but I don't like Lord of the Rings, and I'm pretty sure I never will. And the final question is, what is an adaptation that you think was actually better than the book? I only really have one answer for this, and that is Watchmen. So this is a graphic novel Very famous graphic novel by Alan Moore. It is amazing. It's a brilliant subversion of the superhero thing. I really recommend reading it if you haven't read it. Watch the movie if you haven't seen it, although the movie is like 3 hours long as a heads up. But the reason I think the movie is better is because it essentially is extremely faithful to the source material. It only changes basically two things. One, it is much, much prettier. The artwork of the graphic novel is not great. It's really not a... It's beautifully done. The comic book does a lot of cool visual things in terms of the layout of the pages and stuff like that. But the art itself is not great, in my opinion. And the movie is just beautiful. It's just absolute gorgeous spectacle to watch. The other thing is that it changes a major plot point, which I can't talk about without spoiling everything, but it makes a decision to change a major plot point that doesn't really make much sense in the comic book, and it makes great sense in the movie, and I just think that that was a very smart decision and it was a great way to adapt it. So yeah, those are all of my unpopular opinions. I hope you like this video. I hope you don't all hate me now. Let me know your reactions to these opinions. Please be kind. Like I said, I'm not coming for you if you like any of the things I don't like. That's you. I'm glad. Like I said, I want people to get joy out of things, and if something can bring you joy that doesn't bring me joy, that's great. But yeah, I would like discussions. Friendly discussions are always welcome about things. I'm going to tag for this, I'm going to tag Books with Brandywine, because I don't think she's done it, and I'm also going to tag Charlie Brooke because I couldn't see it on her channel and I don't think she's done it either. So hopefully neither of you have done this. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you did like this video, please give me a thumbs up, it helps me out massively. And I hope to see you next time.